because you only have myself and Stuart. So what does that mean? We're going to bang the shit on about Bitcoin. And they have been quietly buying £750 million in Bitcoin.
One of the best jobs in the world is to spend other people's money and have no repercussions. That is what government is. Well, mate, what are you pulling me in for?
I'm reining you back in. We've got one more point on the Renters Reform Bill.
What was he doing? Doing some sort of crazy dance?
Reining you back in.
Roundup sound. Ooh, yeah. Real estate deals. We lay them down. Let's get those deals. Deals. Deals making money, baby.
Welcome back. Episode 23. Here we are. And today is a very special episode because you only have myself and Stuart. So what does that mean? We're going to bang the shit on about Bitcoin because Dorian and Jack aren't here to shit on us.
Lovely.
So it's going to be a good episode, this. We're going to start with the Renters Reform Bill. So start very property-centric. The Renters Reform Bill currently going through Parliament, which has a massive change to the sector if it gets through. So we'll highlight some of the key changes in that. And then it's just going to be Bitcoin, because there's been major moves again.
There has been some big plays, but ultimately we just feel like because Jack and Dorian, who they sort of understand the concept, but they are totally focused on property, and I totally get that. And they dabbled in a bit, but I just think that if it's just Rye and I, we should probably spend 20 minutes just to explain a little bit about what we see, which to me is so obvious, and I just feel a passion to try and explain it in the easiest possible way for people to see it as clear as I can, because once you've spent the hours and learned a bit about it, it's totally obvious where we're going as humanity. And we've put a few charts together which we've just thought we'd share. These are things that have just solidified my opinion on Bitcoin, and obviously Rye, when we first met, first thing that I knew that Rye liked was Bitcoin, and I said, I'm a massive believer in where it's going, and we've sort of had a decent relationship since then, haven't we, mate? And we've it's been based around what happens with Bitcoin. Yeah, man, absolutely. So hopefully you enjoy it, and let us know in the comments if you don't enjoy it, because we will just shut up about it and keep it to property. But in my opinion,
it has a lot of synergy with property. If you're property,
it's huge.
If anyone's out there thinking of property, what's the fundamental reasons you own assets? It's because, especially in the UK, strong judicial system, property rights, etc. Well, here's a way to not need the judicial part of it. You could just own this sovereign asset class in the ether, and with the upside is like exponential. It's insane. Like the most millionaires and billionaires will be made vicariously through Bitcoin. That is what's going to happen, and it's going to change the economic landscape in the world. Like nations are going to change based on their Bitcoin holdings. It's going to be nuts if it plays out. Or we're wrong, but probably not, because there's much smarter people than us who are seeing what's happening.
It's like saying the internet was wrong. I mean, it's literally like a new protocol that allows you to transfer. It doesn't matter. I mean, there's a great thing that Jack Mallers says. I know we're going straight into Bitcoin. We're going to Renters Reform, but there's an amazing thing Jack Mallers said about, everyone's allergic to this thing. It's like a peanut, right? Everyone doesn't understand it. They don't want to touch it. No governments and countries, wink, wink, want to get involved with it. But effectively, it just allows you to transfer a peanut from one part of the world to the other part of the world effortlessly at the speed of light with no resistance. Where Jack Mallers explains about putting this bowl of peanuts and trail mix in the middle, and he was trying to explain what Bitcoin was as a network, because there's two parts. There's the network effect and there's the Bitcoin physical peanut. There's only 21 million peanuts, but to move $1, you can flip using the Lightning Network. You can flip your dollar onto the peanut, send it around the world immediately, and flip it back into the local currency you want to send it to for free, which, and you look at Western Union and Visa Network, none of these old 20th century technologies can allow you to do that, because it takes 3 or 4 days to send some money. You're paying fee takers all the way around the world. So the actual technology is unbelievable. And I just can't see any other way that it's a one-way street. Everyone's taken adoption of this. And when you understand that, it's like to understand the internet. It's growing faster. We've got a sharp chart, but the Bitcoin network that I've just tried to explain very quickly is growing faster than the speed of the internet. So, you've got millions of people year on year that are adopting this network, and it's the people furthest from the money who have the biggest impact. And obviously we're Western countries, Western worlds, we are very privileged. We've got, fairly safe banking system, but when you've got 70% of the world that's unbanked, this is a huge technology that's going to change the whole way that it'll bring so many people out of poverty. Yeah, it's total bottom up. And when you look at another chart we've got, which is the who owns Bitcoin, over 57%, I think it is, of the world, that Bitcoin is distributed across the people rather than big companies, big central organizations that can control and manipulate it. But now you've got people who are buying it in the billions to own a very small slice of the network. So Bitcoin's already done its job. It's totally decentralized. No one owns it. There's no government. There's no board of directors are deciding what they're going to try and do to manipulate the price. It's a currency, or it's a store of value, and a huge network effect, which is called Metcalfe's law, which is how like Facebook and all these big network effect companies have grown into the trillions, is because it's like the mobile phone is useless when you've got one, but as soon as you've got 3 to 7 to 10 to 20 to to thousands of people using it, that's where the value comes. And another thing that people say about Bitcoin is it's digital, like there's no value, but transferring value, which is a part of the ledger from one point of the world to another point in the world, that's not going to deteriorate over time through debasement. It's like having your mobile phone and giving that to someone and saying, right, look after my phone. Well, your phone has got zero value. Yes, it's physical. But if I swipe it, lose all your emails, delete all your contacts, take all your photos off of it, the actual physical phone, the physical part is worthless. It's the data and the information that it stores. And that's the other thing that Bitcoin does. But we'll come on to that in a minute.
We're going to Bitcoin is going to be
I hope
session
so. We'll try
today.
our best. We'll do our best for the Bitcoin community because
we will.
Good on them.
But here we go. We'll start first with Renters Reform Bill. Fun. So if anyone doesn't know, Parliament is currently, actually, maybe I can show that instead. Let's just see if I can share the screen, share screen,
Parliament.
And
what joke that
Renters
is.
Reform Bill. Yeah, I know. So can you see this showing right now?
Yep.
Yeah. So here we've got government website, and you can see this is the Renters Reform Bill. So just up here, we got a bill to make provision changing the law about rented homes, including provision abolishing fixed term assured tenancies and assured short hold tenancies, imposing obligations on landlords and others in relation to rented homes and temporary and supported accommodation and for connected purposes. You can see the bill's passage. It's gone through. The bill started in the House of Commons, and now it's going through the House of Lords into the second reading. And then there's the final stages there where you then have the royal assent as well. So it's still going through the House of Lords, but pretty confident this is like at least most of this bill is likely to go into force. But we'll see. We may be wrong in that. But let's just start by using our good friend ChatGPT. So we've ran you can download the attachment from the Gov website and you can read the Renters Reform Bill and you can go for everything. But rather than us do that on this podcast, which would take many hours, we've got ChatGPT to highlight the key takeaways for the current rules and what's different about those rules. And there's 8 of them, so we'll just quickly fly through them. So number 1, abolition of fixed term tenancies. So the current rule is most tenants are currently in assured short hold tenancies, which can be fixed terms, usually for 6 to 12 months. The change is all tenancies will be periodic with no fixed end date, allowing tenants to leave with 2 months' notice at any point. So, I mean, we have, especially in HMOs particularly, we have rolling contracts after their first 6 months, and then it just rolls. The reason we don't like doing the first 12 months fix is just in case they mess us about on payments, things like that, and you've got a longer duration to get them out. So it's more security to have them in for 6 months and then roll it. So for HMOs, I don't see this as much of an issue, generally more transient. Buy-to-lets and larger properties maybe more of an issue if people can just quickly leave with 2 months notice and there's not enough security there for the landlord. Not sure how lenders are going to look at this as well. They could have some issues there with security on the tenant actually staying in situ. If you've got, say, a big house and interest payments and the tenant can leave with 2 months notice at any time, what if they leave during winter and you need to get someone else in there, and the lender may have an issue with the eligibility for the homeowners to be able to actually pay the interest. Now, I'm not saying that's definitely going to be their biggest issue. They will have to adjust to the market as we will. But it's just another consideration. What's your thoughts on this one, mate, that they could abolish the fixed term?
Well, my business model is to buy and hold and rent longer term for people to stay as long as they're paying market rates and you've got the opportunity to increase market rates. My big issue is the other end, because I'm not interested in running a letting business. I don't think I am. I just don't need another service-based business. I'd rather pay a nice fee to a great management agent who I use, and they will look after all the demands and the requests of the tenant. My big issue is that there is no minimum date. So on day one, they can effectively hand their notice in, which is going to make a massive impact on the short-term stay apartments. Because why would you want to rent somewhere if I've got a team of 8 or team of 5 that want to stay somewhere? They'll just do an AST. They'll rent there for 8 weeks. They hand the notice in on day one, and I've got to pay an introductory fee and get them all set up and all the what you've got to pay, the inductions and stuff at day one, and then 2 months later they're moving out and I'm paying those fees again. So it'll have
It's a really,
to
really good point, mate. And do you know what that's going to lead to? That's going to lead to, and I'm seeing this in London at the moment, just by trying to secure somewhere. It's going to make most agents and most landlords request that the first 6 months is paid in full. They're going to want more upfront payments.
Or the monthly rent's going to have to go up, because we pay we pay a month's worth of rent every 12 months. So if they're moving out for 6 times a year, 6 times a year, then that's going to have a huge impact and make it totally unviable. If you've got not rogue tenants, but if you've got someone who's playing this game where they know they can move in for 2 months, stay somewhere short term for work, for pleasure, whatever, and then move on, it's just going to make that transition. The hardest bit is the turnover of getting a tenant in there. And if you're going to have to do that effectively 6 times more a year, worst
it's
case,
fundamentally, that's
every other month's worth of profit lost. It doesn't work. It doesn't work.
It's a
and
fundamental
you have
change.
even less rentals.
Yes, it's like they're coming into the market and going, the market is held up by these key sort of pillars, these key metrics that landlords, renters, banks all sort of rely on for security. And if they come in and just go, because of these woke ideologies that, the idea that landlords are like money grabbing bastards, when in fact we make up hardly that much of the market anymore, because of the behemoths that have come in and swaffed up loads of the market, and foreign Saudi funds that own most of the rental stock. Like, it's such a red herring to point the issues at landlords. What the government's really doing, if we're being honest, is they're trying to squeeze small landlords out the market, get rid of SMEs so they can control top down in a more communist style how the actual property and rental sector works, because it's so tethered to the financial system and there's so much vulnerability there for the big banks. So they don't want it to be a free market. They want to control the market. And all of this stuff is nothing to do with protecting renters. Nothing. This is only going to screw renters more, because more landlords will leave the market, and it'll just be big behemoths that control it, and people won't be able to get on the property ladder. So we've got to kind of caveat it with what the real truth is behind most of these changes. It is not to help renters, at least not on balance anyway. The odd few might, but
every decision the government seem to make, the impact is huge. I mean, just let the free market decide. If someone wants to stay for 6 months, if I want to make a rule to say, well, I'm doing a minimum 2-month term on this, if someone wants it, you pay 2 years, then the market will either say, yeah, I'll have it and I'll take it, you're agreed, your terms and conditions, or I won't take it and I'll have the free market to choose where else I want to live, and then it will stay empty at my risk and it will be at my cost. Why the government have to get? I mean, I understand that they want people to feel safe, and I have no problem about the long-term effects. I think if you're going into becoming a property landlord, a buy and hold strategy, then I do think the tenants should have a right. I mean, I've got a property at the moment in Virginia Water that I bought 15 years ago, and now, because I can do so much more with that capital, with the learnings I've got, it makes no sense for me to hold it, pay a premium on the interest, and to make like a third of what I was making in the 5-year fix prior. So I'm going to potentially sell that. But I've got a tenant in there. He's got 12 months or 18 months left on his tenancy. I don't think I should have the right to say, I'm going to hand you 2 months notice, mate, or can I do a deal with you and boot you out, even though the sales team are like, oh, we can sell this at a better price to the open market for people who want to live there. I think I made a decision to do to buy to let, and I've set up as a buy to let, and it should only be resold to someone who wants to invest in a buy to let on a yield basis.
Well,
that I believe is fair.
It's a taking away of property rights. I mean, there is there is still a caveat, I believe, on the Renters Reform Bill, that if you are selling the asset, you do have good reason to kick out the tenant. But it does make it more difficult. It does make
if they've
it more
set up
difficult.
Their home, if they've set up their home and their life, and they've decided they want to spend 3 years or whatever, I think the AST max is 3 years. But if they've signed a 3-year contract, I should honour that. And you can try and negotiate with them. But if they decide after 3 years they want to stay for another 3 years and they're happy to pay the market rent, then I
Yeah.
don't see why business operators should have the right. It's hard. 6 of one, half does the other. I mean, like,
It's hard, but yeah, but you got to think about the key fundamental there. I agree. Yeah, if you've got a 3-year contract with a tenant, and nothing changes in the market, and you have no real reason to want to sell the asset or anything like that, then why would you kick them out? That's the free market working. But if during
yeah,
those 3 years there's huge interest rate hikes, you have something personally that happens at home, and you need capital back. You've got some other project that's gone wrong here, where you're putting up all this risk capital to try and help a market, stimulate a market, provide for jobs, things like that. You should have every right to want to sell your asset, and which comes back to our sovereign property
yeah,
rights,
but
right?
you can sell them in situ. I think that if you've made a decision to do a 3-year tenancy with someone, you've made a
Mhm.
commercial decision. And I think that this problem, again, if you're buying things in your personal name and making personal decisions, it
Yeah.
is a bit of a touchy subject. If you're making a commercial decision in your business to sign a 3-year contract with someone, I honestly feel like you should honor that contract. And then at the end of that decision, I mean, what you should really do is tie in a 1, 2, or 3-year fixed with your mortgage. So you are in that position to make a decision 2 months prior to either renew a mortgage based on, I mean, if you're taking a fixed rate mortgage, if you're doing variable rates, then you're taking more of a commercial risk.
Mm.
But I do think that we should look at it more of a business rather than and I think that's what the government are probably trying to do. They're trying to push people down. Let's try and create a more of a professional, um, tenancy act. So I have no problem with the longer term stuff being fixed. If you agree to a 3 or 4 year, 5-year fixed, then
Mm.
that should be honoured, because that person's building their whole life around your property and they're building their friend network, the schools, and all the rest of it.
Yeah.
But the minimum side is insane. It doesn't work, because if you're going to have people, if you have 4 or 5 tenants in a year that are moving in, moving out, and you're paying all those fees, you have 2
Mm.
choices. You either don't rent and you come out of the market, or you up your fees to almost double to say, well, that's what the market rate needs to be
Mm.
to be
Or you ask for rent up front.
to hedge the
I,
risk,
I
or
think
you ask for
most
rent up
most
front. Yeah,
landlords, particularly in
you can't
London,
hold it if
most landlords will.
they pay you 6 months and then you want to stay for free, you owe them the money back. So paying up front makes no odds, because you're I don't know if it would work.
Well, I suppose, yeah. If they still leave, yeah, you've got a. There's yeah, you got a point. Yeah, if they still leave in those 2 months, you still owe them that money back. Um, Interesting.
It doesn't work. That's why it's going in the House of Lords, and it'll probably take another fucking year for them to get around to
To
agreeing
actually sort it
something. But
out. Yeah. Well,
I don't know
let's
what
go
they're
on to
trying
the
to
next point.
solve. What are they trying to solve? That's the
It's
key
the
thing.
odd few. Well, it comes back to that fundamental truth. They're just trying to make it harder for the small people in the sector, because this isn't a mass problem. This is a few isolated incidences where the individuals speak much louder than the silent moderates, and the government wants to appease the voter base, so they've used it as a talking point, and because they've used it
Mm.
as a talking point, it's something they've guaranteed they're going to deliver on with these sort of hypothetical scenarios where, oh, if we do this and do that, then your rents will come down, and that never works. They have to build more homes and rents come down, not here's a new legislation, more landlords
Rents
leave the
come
market.
down when inflation comes down. Inflation comes
Yeah,
down when they stop printing money, and that's basically the fundamental part of
and
it.
when we
Is
can
that,
build more houses.
well, yeah, the supply demand, but at the moment,
Yeah.
property is only linked. Property is the only way you could secure your wealth in today's money for the future. So your time and energy is secured in the property that inflates over time based on the greed and power of governments and the Fed and
Yeah.
ECB and all the rest of it. So they create the problem, and then they try and look like they're trying to solve the problem, and it's just a complete. We all know that it's the whole world is falling apart in a financial place, and that's because the
Yeah.
cancerous fiat system that we use is creating all these problems, and they're trying to look like they're fixing it at the short term, but they're literally just tapping their fingers on the top of the water. The problem's so
Yeah.
deep down
But
that
it's
none of
also a
this really
control
actually
grab,
matters.
though. It's also control, like beyond just the fiat system. It's also governments trying to get more control on our free markets. And this renters
Mhm.
reform bill is just another way for them to control landlords and their sovereignty and their rights to own. They own their property, they earn their money, and they manage to buy it. They should be able, I'd think, be able to choose to do what they want with it. And the free market should be able to manage that. But yeah, let's go to the second point. So the
Mm.
abolition of Section 21 no fault evictions. So the current rule is landlords can serve a Section 21 notice after a fixed term to regain possession without needing a reason. So you can kick a tenant out without needing a justifiable reason at the end of their term. The change is that Section 21 notices, which allow landlords to evict tenants without a reason, will be abolished. But I think that's kind of fair. I'm actually not so against that clause, so long as it's not abused. Because fundamentally, if you've got no reason to kick someone out, well, then you've got no reason to kick someone out. And it still is a case that if you wanted to sell the property, then there's no problem. But I can see it getting to a point where there'll be more legislation. You know, give the government an inch, they'll take a mile. This is just the start. They will then just gradually take more and more mileage into the landlord sector. Then number 3,
Yeah, but
revised grounds.
reason is subjective. I mean, they need to be clear on what the reasons
Yeah.
could be.
Yeah. Well, selling the asset is one of those reasons, and obviously, if Section 8 will still be there if tenants don't actually pay their bills. So, I mean, in general, I think number 1 is the first, the abolition of fixed term tenancies. I think is a very sketchy thing to do. I think that can really distort how the free market dynamics currently work. Number 2, I don't personally see much of an issue with. So I can't see where that critical path could lead to a bad outcome. But maybe I'm wrong there. And then number 3, revised grounds for possession. So current rule, Section 8 already exists, but is used less frequently than Section 21 because it requires landlords to prove the tenant's breach of contract. The change, the grounds for repossession, Section 8, are expanded to include situations like landlords selling the property or moving in themselves. Additionally, there are stronger protections for tenants against unfair evictions. Again, I think that's perfectly fair. I think number 2 and 3 could actually improve the sector potentially, if not abused, and if the legislation is written really well, which it should be. So number 2 and 3, okay. And then number 4, rent increases. So the current rule, landlords can increase rents at the end of a fixed term tenancy or during a periodic tenancy by mutual agreement or by issuing a Section 13 notice. The change is rent increases will follow a statutory procedure and can only be once a year. Tenants can challenge rent increases at a tribunal. Now, this is touching this is really starting to constrain the free market. Like, absolutely, I think there should be, and there is at the moment. You can't just up the rent each month. You can up it at given intervals, and I think once a year is probably not quite enough. Once every 6 months, I think, is fine. Or depends how transient the tenancies are. And HMOs, you can do it obviously when each one leaves, which makes life easier. But what they absolutely cannot do is try and fix rent increases to CPI or something like that, because it's not just CPI that affects rent increases. It could be the availability of that specific stock in that given area. And that can change how the free market reprices certain streets and postcodes and other things. And that, again, can lead to more landlords exiting the market. And it's just not a good idea for them to even look at rental caps, which is what this starts to touch on. So
I agree. I think that it should be a commercial decision and based on someone taking out a contract with a hire car. I can't go in and renegotiate, a purchase agreement on a new car or a lease car. It's the same with property. I mean, if I'm doing a deal with someone and I want to move them in on a 3 or a 5-year fixed, and we agree that after the first 2 years we can agree a 1 to 6% cap and collar, so you can go up minimum 1%, maximum we'll agree at say 5% of the market rent. Then that's a commercial decision between me and a tenant. I mean, I don't understand what they're trying to do. If I decide I want to give them a 1-year contract and I can then upgrade or change the rules in 1 year because that suits my business, then that's what I'm allowed to do. And it's just insanity. It feels to me like the changes they're making is to try and boot out the small time property developers, buy to let holders, increase the. Basically, to me, it sounds like they want more people to rent, because if they're renting more, it's the same you'll own nothing and you'll be happy strategy, which is the big corporations, the big organizations will own a lot of the property stock that you'll be constantly paying debt to them, which allows them to grow. It gives tenants the freedom to move around. But ultimately, out of the population, who does move into one town for 2, 3, 4, 6 months, move to the other side of the world for 2, 4, 6 months? People meet people, they get married, they have kids, they want a home. And I just don't see. I mean, obviously, property is becoming so expensive.
particularly in the UK.
I totally believe that the viewers of this need to please listen to the next half to just take 1 or 2 sections away and just start your own Bitcoin journey, because this is all solved rents are coming down in the world I live in, which is a different monetary system, and that's why I sleep like a baby at night, because I'm living in a different parallel universe to what we're being made to be brainwashed to live in, which is the fiat system. And all these problems are money related. It's all about greed and power, and about how they can create more power to try and hedge themselves as corporations or governments against the inflation that they create. It's just insanity.
Yeah, but I would say caveat that, you know, if they make the world is becoming more and more globalized, obviously, as each year goes on, and more interconnected, and people can work from home and all this other kind of stuff. And if they make it harder and harder for people to rent in the UK, we'll just see more and more mass exodus of the brightest minds going to places like Saudi, other areas of Europe, America, anywhere else, so that they can, rather than paying, you know, $2,000 a month to rent a shitty little 1-bed flat on a shit street in fucking Croydon, they'll go spend $2,000 a month and rent a luxurious villa on the coast of Italy, because they can work from home. And we're going to create that dynamic by the economy getting squeezed because of this sort of legislation. But let's go on to the last 4 points quick, just to box this
Just
bit
that
off.
last point, that I totally see that in the next decade. So my kids growing up into sort of their late teens, early 20s and stuff, house prices are going to be so expensive and rents are going to be so expensive. And that's not the landlord's problem. That's because they've got to pay the interest and the costs of what, you know, life is. I honestly see couples living together. So rather than having, HMOs are so popular right now because obviously the cost of living is so expensive. People can share the costs of, of the energy, the electricity, water, gas, internet. All these costs can be shared by up to 6 people, which is the landlord's costs to keep everyone under one roof. But ultimately, if people are going to start renting flats, and you can take a 2-bed flat, you'll probably have two couples living there, sharing the kitchen and the bathroom. If they want to move out, it's got to happen, and it's a real shame. If you go back 20 years or 30 years, you'd have one family member going up to work, and the wife or the husband would look after the kids, and they would be able to raise 3 kids and a dog and live off one salary. And now you've got two people that are both having almost 2 jobs to sustain the lifestyle that they used to have. It's just it's crazy, man. Anyway, let's carry on.
All right, last 4 points on the Renters Reform Bill. So, the right to request a pet. The current rule, landlords can currently refuse tenants' requests to keep pets without providing a reason. The change, tenants will have the right to request permission to keep a pet, and landlords cannot unreasonably refuse. I mean, again, that's just, it should be completely my decision. If, you know, that should be completely your decision. And all that's going to happen with this is landlords are going to ask for larger deposits, and they're going to need some sort of extra security, because, and I know there's obviously legislation to prevent the amount of the deposit that's allowed. So then landlords will find ways around it. They'll want some other safeguard. If they really don't want a dog in there chewing up, they might have real bespoke joinery or something. It might be an old Victorian. It might be a listed building, and they've got all this joinery and like nice stuff in the property. And what do dogs and cats do? I've got cats, and they scratch the shit out of everything, and dogs chew the shit out of everything when they're small dogs. Fish, birds, whatever, shit like that. All right, but dogs and cats notoriously will damage homes if they're not looked after well by the tenants. Obviously, there's good tenants who look after dogs, and there's good dogs, there's good cats, but to just open end that and go, tenants should be allowed to bring their pets in anywhere.
There's a lot of people who have got animals since COVID. Obviously, a lot of dogs and stuff. I mean, dogs 10x'd in value, in price over COVID. I've got 2 dogs. I'm a pet lover. We've got a split approach on that. So we've got obviously blocks of flats, ones that we can create gardens for. We generally will allow pets. The pros and cons are that they absolutely stink. You know, when they move out, it takes 3 to 6 months to get rid of the smell. And if you've got another person moving in after who hasn't got a pet, you know, it's almost embarrassing at the point where you're like, I'm really that stench that you can just smell in the air. It's quite bad.
Pissing on the carpets and shit. Like, my cats piss on the carpet, and I'm gonna have to replace these carpets when I leave this place, and I know I'm gonna have to pay for that. But there's people out there who aren't as good as, I'm not saying I'm great, but there's people who honor that. Look, my cat's fucked the carpet, I need to pay for it. There's plenty of people who will not do that, and the carpets get damaged, maintenance costs go up, so rents need to go up accordingly. Like, it's just, it should be the landlord's discretion. If the landlord doesn't want a pet in there, you shouldn't be allowed a pet in there. I think it should be that clear cut. I don't know why that's.
But if I was guessing, if you look at the amount of tenants that have got pets, I mean, if it's almost like saying that if you're a tenant and you want to rent somewhere, you haven't got the right to buy a pet, and if you're a true animal lover, you're going to want a pet. But then if you look at, then you're totally restricted to where you can live, because I reckon it's probably, what, 4% of rental stock is probably pet friendly. So it does limit your choice. But ultimately, there's flats. So if you're going to have a 37 square meter flat on the 4th floor, should you really have a great big dog upstairs? I mean, that's
Yeah.
sort of unfair on the animal, in my opinion. So
Yeah.
we try and split it and be as fair as we can. When we can create little courtyards and gardens for animals' welfare, then it sort of feels right. But then we'll charge that a little bit more, and yeah, we'll have a pet clause in there, and they'll have to change carpets and stuff. But yeah, if it's not right for the animal, it's not right for the owner of the
Yeah.
animal.
And that's why it should be down to the landlord, because there's no legislation that can really pick up on that. Like if I was renting a house with a big garden, I wouldn't really give a shit if they've got cats or dogs. Wouldn't bother me. But in an apartment, and you've got dogs that would be barking at night and like pissing off other neighbors, and like I just think it's I don't know why they're even talking about this issue.
Because it's
It's
a big
weird.
issue, isn't it? It's a big issue for
I know,
tenants who
but
have got animals. Like, what do you do?
But like
Um,
the answer is, well, don't fucking buy animals. Like if you're renting, like don't buy animals. If you know you're constrained to rent and you can only rent flats, then I'm sorry, but it's like cars. If you're in central London, it's really hard to get a property with a car parking space. So you just can't get a car parking space. So therefore, you probably shouldn't have a car if you're in London. And the free market just allows for these things to like naturally nurture themselves into the right positions. And it should be the same with pets. Like if you can only live in apartments, I think it's cruelty anyway to have a dog in just an apartment. Like you should have some kind of outdoor space. They should be able to roam on the grass. And is it a case that because now society, everyone wants to have pets, we should then change legislation in our rental agreements to accommodate that? Is that how it should work, or should it just be that more people shouldn't have pets if more landlords don't want them to live in their properties with pets because of the tangible damages that can be caused by pets, and they
yeah.
do cause a lot of damages and grief.
It's a good point with the car,
Yeah.
though. I mean, yeah, you make compromises. If you want to live in central,
You
you
make
don't have a
compromise, yeah.
car, and you get a bike and use public transport. And if you want a car, and you move out of town a little bit, that can accommodate
Yeah.
it. So yeah, you just have to. I just think they've got such a limited supply of properties that can't
Yeah, that's the
have
ultimate
pets. I think,
problem, really. Yeah.
yeah, and a lot of
The
people
ultimate
are
problem
shouting
is not
about it,
building
and
enough.
they're trying to fix it, but yeah,
Yeah, and yeah, you're absolutely right. They're linking the fact that we're not building enough houses, which is a government issue and a planning issue and all the bullshit legislation issues, and then going, well, let's just make sure everyone can have a pet in their house. But if we're building enough stock and there was enough stock going around, then there would be more optionality in the market. And this is another way to try and change and constrain something that is a symptom of another problem, which they're still
yeah.
not addressing. All right, so then we've got the landlord redress scheme. So the current rule, redress schemes are currently mandatory for letting agents, but not individual landlords. All landlords, this is the change, must now join a redress scheme, providing tenants with more accessible avenues to resolve disputes. I agree with that. I actually agree with that.
We use the FMB for any of our issues and stuff. I think having a redress scheme that's there to support the tenant and the landlord makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree with that. I think because that is where rogue landlords become an issue, where they're directly managing the tenant. Whereas an agency that's regulated and in between and with a reputation to uphold and things like that, and with the staff to be able to answer maintenance issues and stuff like that, I think that's a better way to do things. So then the next one is decent home standards. So the current rule, while some minimum standards exist, such as energy performance and health and safety, they are less comprehensive. They are less comprehensive than the proposed standard. The bill introduces a decent home standard which will apply to the private rental sector, ensuring minimum standards of safety, cleanliness, and repair. Well, hang on, the cleanliness and repair can be directly affected by the fact that pets are in a house. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, but it would be down
Like,
to the tenant to make sure that the minimum standards are held. It must be on the
if
way
the
in and on
tenant
the
pays
way out.
for it, but what if the tenant doesn't pay for it, and you can only take a maximum amount of deposit, and then will the tenant pay for further damages if they do? All they need to do is destroy a few carpets, and there's the deposit gone in it. If they then chew up joinery and other shit and just genuinely leave the house stinking or pissing on walls, and I've seen it in rental properties. I've seen what dogs and cats can do to places with bad tenants, but or just bad pet owners, of which there are quite a few out there. And there's people who hoard
Mm,
pets.
mm.
How much do you cap the pets? What if I've got 7 cats? What if I've got 3, 4
8
dogs?
dogs. Yeah.
There are people that do it, innit? Like, I've seen people in London with like 3-4 dogs in a little terrace Victorian house with like a tiny yard, and I'm like, how the fuck are you? Like, your house must be grim inside. Like, there's no way. Like, dogs just aren't clean. What if it's raining? All the dogs come in and they're soaking wet, and then they're shaking off. And I know it sounds trivial, but all these things will cause more issues if like, and then putting them together to try and say, and they need to be a cleanly premises and safe and health and safety and all that bullshit. That what standard is that like, and who's responsible for paying for that? How
Who's going to
strong are the
police it as
inventory
well?
checks, and who's policing it? Yeah,
And it's all subjective. I mean, cleanliness. I would like to think we
who's
live in a
cleanliness
fairly
mean?
clean house. Yeah, exactly. But other people might go, "You live disgusting." And obviously, I see a lot of customers' houses. I've been in thousands of homes, and the spectrum's massive.
Mm,
And I can't believe some people live the way they live,
yeah,
with stuff everywhere on top of all their worktops. The kitchen, there's no worktop space. It's just, it is what it is. And then you've got some
you're right
people
there.
who live
Yeah,
immaculately. So
who
it's
is
all
who is
subjective.
the arbiter of
Who's going
cleanliness?
to
Like,
police
who
it and
is?
say that's you're too
Yeah.
clean, mate? You need to,
And if they do try and pigeonhole it into a few specific points, then now there's another thing for agents to have to do, which is going to increase more costs because they're going to have to make sure that it ticks these boxes so they stay compliant. Like, and then
which
rents
means
go
rent
up.
goes up.
Yeah. Okay, so that's a decent
Just
home
stay
standards.
out
Now
of
the
it.
last one.
If it's a shithole, if it's a shithole of a house and they're asking for too much money, it stays empty. And
Yeah.
if they need to, and the feedback is, I mean, I can't sell my house. When you sell your house, you get feedback, right? Someone goes, I want to buy it, or I don't want to buy it. And I don't want to buy it because of X, Y, and Z. And then you have a choice. You either don't sell your house, you drop the price, or you improve the bits that they've said they don't like.
Yeah.
Same with the rental market. There's no difference. It's like they're trying to protect people who can't afford to rent, but they're the reason why they can't afford to buy,
Yeah.
because of their own policies, which are hidden in
Yeah.
deep in legislation, which are all these loopholes which allow people to print or borrow more money, which then inflates the amount of pounds in society, which means
Yeah.
everything that's got any value in it, like a property, goes up because there's more pounds available to buy the asset. It's like
Yeah.
it's 101 year 9 basic maths. And when you do understand Bitcoin, a lot of this stuff disappears because that goes up 45% on average year on year. And you're smashing inflation. And if I can't wait for the day where I can ask for my rent in Bitcoin. I can go into a shop and buy a Bitcoin, and it's coming. It might be in the next 2, 3, 5, 7, 10 years, but it's coming. And because they're losing control, and we all know it's losing control, because the point at which hyperinflation happens in Venezuela, they linked it back in 2016. The people of Venezuela could literally feel when things have doubled in price. That was the point of hyperinflation, and that's now what I feel. When I go to Costa and I spend £9 on 2 coffees, almost £10, I'm thinking, this is fucking crazy. This is a cut of coffee beans and some hot water and some milk, and I'm paying a £6, £5 for it. Go on, mate. What are you pulling me in for?
I'm
The
reining you
Bitcoin.
back in. We've got one
All
more
right, sorry,
point on the
mate.
renters reform bill.
What was he doing? Doing some sort of crazy
Just
dance.
reining you back in.
Yeah,
Last point, and
sorry,
then
mate.
we're going to fucking Bitcoin smash. Last point is repayment of rent. So the current rule is there is currently no statutory provision for the repayment of rent in advance if the tenant moves out before the end of the rental period. This is something you actually touched on a minute ago. The change is tenants will have the right to a repayment of rent paid in advance if they leave the tenancy early. Don't think there's crazy issue with that, to be honest. So long as it's written well and the tenants can't exploit that system, and it's very easy to exploit the rental system. It's just being careful of how it's worded. But I don't think I don't see on the face of it why there's a I do think there are legislation. I do agree that there is legislation within the rental sector at the moment where there are room for improvements with better legislation, better worded laws and rules and things like that. There's always rooms for improvement on existing stuff. I just worry when they add more layers in that can distort incentives and distort the market.
See,
But
I
something like this, I think, is
disagree
okay.
with it. I disagree
Okay, go
because,
on.
again, it goes back to that commercial decision of I decide that I've got 3 people offering, and someone comes to me and says, look, give us a £5 a month off or £20 a month off, and I'll pay you a year up front. That was the deal which we agreed in writing, and they paid. That money gets sent to the letting agent. They take their cut. They send me the balance. Then all of a sudden, they decide after 4 months or after 2 months they want to come out of that agreement. I've then got to find the cash to give them money back. So once I've done a deal, I've then spent that money on another project, or I'm using it to grow the business. I don't want to then have holes in my, and the bigger you get, the worse that problem could become, because the more deals I can do where people want to pay 12 months up front, I'm using that as a cash flow, going, right, excellent, I can now buy another property, I can put it to work, and I don't want to leave cash in the bank. That's the worst thing you can do. So if I'm making these decisions for my business and all of a sudden 50% of my tenants decide to move out, that could create a massive hole where I'm then going to be exposed. And that's unfair for me as a landlord versus the tenant. So I think it goes down to the fact if I make an agreement in business, I decide to buy a property, buy a company, rent a property, I can't change my lease. If I was a business and I want to take a 5-year no break clause on a lease, why should it be any different to a tenant? Everyone who takes a rental tenancy can understand bullet points of what they're agreeing to. And if they agree to it and they sign it and they pay their 1 year up front, that's it. The deal done. I don't know why again the government have to sort of protect the people.
I completely agree with that in that framing. I just think there is room for, the tenant also may suddenly have an issue at home and they need to leave for whatever reason, wife, whatever, someone passes away and they need to go and like live somewhere else and support the family or something, and then obviously they're paying this rent, and in which case there would be fair terms for them getting that money back, right? So there's definitely,
because if I go and lease a vehicle for 4 years, a petrol or diesel vehicle, and I go to Mercedes and I take out a £700 or £1,000 a month contract, and then all of a sudden any of those issues you just said in month 3, can I go to Mercedes and say, I've changed my mind, actually I've had it for 4 months, take the news off it,
different,
can I just end this? Why is that different?
It's different. It's not different in the principle of the agreement, but it's different that there's degradation on the vehicle, amortization, things like that. The vehicle depreciates in value, and generally getting that back out to market could be a bit of a ball ache. But if a tenant gives you 2 months notice, it goes, oh, can I get that money back on the additional 6 months? Within 2 months, you'll be able to re-rent that property probably for a higher amount. So I do think the
But you still got
landlord
to fill the
has.
hole. You still got to
Yeah,
fill
you
a
still
6 month hole, of which you've got to pay them back out of capital,
I've got to
working
pay them
capital,
back,
cash flow for a business, to then wait 6 months and the market might have dropped, not in your favor. So you might have lost 10% of the rent. And that's the reason why they might go, oh yeah,
potentially.
someone's died.
Yeah.
So it gives them total
There could be
rights to
lies,
manipulate whatever they want. It could be whatever they want. It just doesn't work. Again, it's leave the market to do what the market wants to do. If I want to agree a 6 month if I agree someone to give them a 15% discount for a 3-year fixed contract, and they want to pull out after 6 months because in their mind, they're like, I only need this space for 6 months, but let me knock them down as much as I can, get a price, get it agreed. I'll use it for 3 weeks because that's all I needed to be there for. Then I'll give them a 2-month issue date. Not only have I get all my money back, but I get to move out when I want. It's just weighted so much in the tenant's favor. And I'm not against tenants being secure. And I think that they should be able to stay there as long as they want. I think once they've moved in and they've agreed it, as long as they pay the market rent, and me as a business is allowing them to rent a property, then I think they do have rights to stay there as long as possible. I think the minimum term problem is a problem. And I think that, if we agree something contractually, then that's it.
Yeah, it's that. No, you are. Yeah, you're sort of changing my opinion on that. On the contract part of it is important. The contract part. If you have a commercial, our whole society is built on agreements between each other, and if
All
you can
built
just
agreements. We
if you
agreed to
can
meet
just
here at
change.
7:20. We agreed to meet at 7:20 this morning to do this contract, to do this, which is a contract. Everything, and that's where the blockchain comes in, because that is an agreement made on a blockchain, which when everything has been agreed, the transaction can happen, and that's programmable and that's digital. And this is where every single transaction, in my opinion, will be based on a blockchain. So there'll be absolute 100% visibility forever because it's locked in bytes of data, which anyone can refer back to and go, oh, actually, on whatever day, or 25th of September, we made a contractual agreement, and it's there written in the blockchain. It can't be changed. Fuck. Point 8, mate. Let's move on. Let's get to the good
Point 8,
bit.
right? Yeah, come on, let's fuck this off now. But anyway, the as far as going through this is a quick summary. There's points in there which I understand. I understand from the tenant standpoint. I am a tenant myself. I rent this house because I don't want to particularly buy a house here because I don't know if I'm going to be here long term. So I rent, and that's my right, and that's easy to do. And I pay my rent, and I'm a good tenant. Blah 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 blah. But there are certain things where I could exploit my landlord, or my landlord could exploit me, but we don't. We get along. It's nice and civil. We pay for everything. We chip in on the maintenance stuff and just sort of get stuff organized and done for them. Healthy, free market dynamics. That is on balance how most tenants behave. You and I are the same. Most people we know are all the same. There are the odd people in the market that ruin it for everyone else from the landlord side and the tenant side. And we should make sure that we don't interrupt the free market. as much as possible. Otherwise, those things can get exploited even more. And I think, on balance, this rental reform bill is going to create more room for exploitation, and that therefore landlords are going to exit the market in their droves, and that is going to make rents much more unaffordable for tenants. And then they're going to try bring in rental caps, and that's just going to be an absolute shit show, as it has been in Singapore, Japan, Germany, and all the other places that they've tried this before. But anyway, that's the rental reform bill. Please let us know in the comments, and hit us up on DMs or whatever if you've got any ideas yourself on the rental reform bill. We'd be happy to have a look through those, because I am interested to see what the market and what other developers think of these sort of changes, because they are fundamental. But now let's get on to Bitcoin. So obviously you got just Stuart and myself today, so it makes sense for us to hash through this. But there's equally been another big story in the Bitcoin space. So we'll go through this quickly. So Bhutan, which is a small little country out in the Himalayas, they've got a 3 billion GDP, so 900,000 population, small little country. And they have been quietly buying £750 million in Bitcoin, which, if they're 3 billion GDP, is almost a third of their GDP. So I'm going to read some of this article quick because it's fascinating. So blockchain intelligence from Arkham revealed on September 16th, 2024, that Bhutan's Bitcoin holdings have reached $750 million. This represents approximately 27.9% of Bhutan's estimated 2023 GDP of 2.68 billion. Notably, Bhutan's Bitcoin holdings are more than twice the value of El Salvador's, which stand at 335 million, despite Bhutan having only about 12% of El Salvador's population, which is a mad statistic. The holdings come from Bhutan's own mining operations, which have ramped up dramatically since 2019. So what are the origins of Bhutan's cryptocurrency strategy from 2019? Bhutan's venture into Bitcoin mining began in April 2019, when the cryptocurrency was valued at approximately $5,000. The country's sovereign investment arm, Druk Holding and Investments, confirmed to local newspaper, The Bhutanese, that it entered the mining space at this time. The kingdom leveraged its abundant hydroelectric resources to power its mining operations. Bhutan's rivers, fed by Himalayan glaciers, which provide significant hydropower potential with 23,760 megawatts, identified as technically feasible, and hydropower accounting for 30% of Bhutan's GDP. Notably, 99.5% of Bhutan's electricity came from hydropower in 2003, with per capita electricity consumption at 949 kilowatts that year, according to a study by Mr. Sonan Tasharing and Mr. Bharat Tamang. So to put this into perspective, the 23,000 megawatts of feasible hydropower could theoretically power over 17 million average American homes, or supply the entire energy needs of a city like New York twice over. This abundant clean energy allows Bhutan to power large-scale Bitcoin mining operations while maintaining its commitment to environmental sustainability. Bhutan's decision to enter the cryptocurrency market was driven by economic necessity. The country faced declining tourism revenues and sought to diversify its income sources. The COVID-19 pandemic, which later severely impacted Bhutan's $88.6 million annual tourism revenue, further validated this strategic move. Bitcoin mining offered a way to monetize Bhutan's energy surplus and potentially secure a new revenue stream for the kingdom, according to a Forbes article by journalists Ian Martin and Sarah Emerson. So that is very interesting, how this tiny little sovereign nation, tiny, like in the grand scheme of things, has managed to leverage its natural resource into owning one of the most scarce and sovereign asset classes in the world, which is just another story of the ground up acquisition of Bitcoin. Anything to say on this, Stu, because you are the guy that saw this?
Man, it's insane. I'm just looking now. So Bhutan has become the fourth biggest country in the world that holds Bitcoin, which is insanity, because the ones above that is China. I think they own the most, then US,
No, it's
then
the
the
US.
UK.
US,
Oh, is it US
China,
first? Sorry, I'm just having a
Britain.
quick look online. I should have got it ready, but yeah, it doesn't matter. You got the big, you got US, you got China, you got the UK. Germany sold all their holdings. They sold 60 odd thousand through a decision a few months ago, which was the biggest, the detrimental of their country, really, because it is that important. And when you understand how scarce Bitcoin is, first you have to either mine it or you have to buy it. Now, Western countries are going to have to buy it because they're going to be too late to the party. And it's almost like a stack of cards, a domino effect. Once one country does it, another country has to try and stay on par, and it's going to have a complete reshuffle in countries' political power and the economic power which they produce. Now, the best thing about geothermal or having what they
Hydropower.
use, hydropower, geothermal, is these countries like in Finland, and it's very difficult to take electricity from that part of the world and actually use it for energy that we use it for lighting, heating, and all the rest of it for humans. But if you can take a miner and you can put it on a on a glacier way out somewhere, all you need is an internet connection. And with Starlink, you can literally mine Bitcoin and then put it into become a mining operator
At the source.
At source, and all you need is an internet connection, and you can mine Bitcoin. So it's going to have a lot of these third party, third, what are they called? Countries. What are they called?
Third world countries.
Third world countries. That's the word.
Developing
Third world
nations,
countries.
yeah.
So it gives them a huge opportunity to get on. And I was working out actually, because we do a lot of properties with solar panels now, and we're putting batteries in. I'm trying to work out how many solar panels I'd need to run the HMO as efficiently as possible, and how much surplus power I'd need to run a mining rig. Now, a mining rig's about $4,000, but they can produce about £200 worth of Bitcoin per month, which is like a 65% return on investment. So if I can actually increase the solar panels when I'm actually building my HMOs, why am I not trying to design it where I'm putting a $4,000 miner in? Yes, you need to get cold air in and warm air out, and it has to be built around it. But if I'm going to build a portfolio of properties, I should really think about it, because the most expensive part of running Bitcoin is the energy. The media really sort of put a weight on. The first, it was for gangsters and the black market, and for people, for drug dealers to move drugs around without being caught, which was a big FUD. Then it was the energy. It's really bad for the environment. I've got a very good friend of mine who's super bright, and he literally completely flooded Bitcoin when I started speaking to him about it. And I said, no, I don't like what it's doing to the environment, because it uses a lot of energy. It doesn't necessarily make it bad. It just means it becomes unaffordable to mine Bitcoin when you're paying retail prices for energy. So yes, you're using a lot of energy to keep the network secure, which it needs energy. Everything in life needs energy to become valuable. Humans need a lot of energy to survive.
The
The
ultimate
best things we've
commodity,
ever
isn't it?
created. The best things we ever created require energy. Flame, electricity. These things are highly charged. It moves at a certain frequency, which, high frequency, you want things to move around super quick. And it's basically, the Bitcoin network is a hive. It's like a virus. It's like a virus that's spread around the world, and the more it spreads, the stronger it becomes and the safer it becomes. It's past the point now, so now it's inevitable. It's going to go to zero, or it's going to go on forever and infinite in terms of value in Bitcoin versus any fiat you want to peg it to. And these countries have got the opportunity to mine it. They maybe not can't afford it, but to have a third of your GDP of a country, that just shows you how much they believe in it as a government and a country.
And how much they need
It is
it.
absolutely inevitable.
They need it.
They
Look at them.
need it.
They lose the tourism, and they need some other way to monetize. So they're monetizing their hydropower at source to then acquire a stake in the most powerful, seemingly the most powerful asset to have ever existed, essentially transferring commodity energy into scarce asset energy at source without any permission required from the US, from the Federal Reserve, from the fucking International Monetary Settlement funds. They don't need any permission. They could just do it and get onto that network. And that is such a ground up.
It's amazing.
Ground up.
It's absolutely amazing.
It's
it's the domino effect. Before we'll know it. I mean, there's a guy called Mr. 100, and no one knows who he is, or they are, or country, because the beautiful thing about Bitcoin is that you get a wallet, which is alphanumeric. It's a load of numbers and characters. You can see on the Bitcoin on the blockchain what's going in and out of that wallet, but you don't actually know who owns that wallet. Now, there's someone that's buying like 100 Bitcoin every few hours. As the market's going up, they're buying a bit more. They've sold a little bit as it's come down, but they now understand the market more. But that could be a country, that could be Tim Cook, that could be it could be it could be a sovereign wealth fund, it could be Dubai, it could be anyone who's buying this stuff. And it's all being done privately behind the scenes at the moment. And the second that this stuff comes out, I mean, Donald Trump's come out with his new crypto and Bitcoin are totally different. The crypto market, where there's thousands and thousands of different tokens, are all centralized. They're all made up. There's a head leader who's basically a salesperson, and they'll shill their own token to make it pump, and then some people take money out and it drops. But that is not what Bitcoin is. Bitcoin is a secure network And it's the network which is unbelievably powerful. It's like a protocol. It's like HTTPL. It's like the internet. I don't understand. There's a slide in here which actually explains what Bitcoin is. I think it's the next slide, isn't it, mate? About that sentence,
Yeah, it
which I
is,
want to read out quickly.
Yeah, go on.
Flick over. So Bitcoin is everything people don't know about computers combined with everything they don't understand about money. And if you understand what money is and how we've been brainwashed to think that the piece of paper, the £5 note, the £10 note, the £50 note has got any value, and it hasn't got any value. It's just a promise that the government make us use so they control the amount. If you can print anything, you're devaluing that currency. And because all the countries around the world do it at the same time, with the IMF and the Bank of England and everyone and the ECB, everyone raises their rates or lowers their rates to keep everything looking the same on the surface. Deep down, if you're adding more and more cash to each of these banks, then the time and energy you and I have put into working hard, into working on the checkouts or working at an IT company or whatever you do in life, the money that we've earned in that moment in time has been devalued, and that's it's absolutely criminal. And I just think that people watching this,
I think that goes over people's heads sometimes, that understanding of why it's theft, because people
it's
generally
inflation.
see, because they see the monetary system and the working system, so i.e. labor, so people who just work, spend their time, they see those two things as separate things, as if they're not binary, but these two things are joint and several. The money system is held up completely by human time and energy. And there's Jack Mallers a really good talk on this, how all money is an extrapolation of human time and energy and technology. I would layer in one more thing, that
in today's
technology,
day.
and technology is a tool that can leverage human time and energy. And once you understand that is what money is, if you then have central government able to print more of that, they are essentially falsifying the value in your time and energy extrapolation. So they are effectively stealing your time and energy, which is why people who earn a wage and don't own assets in times of inflation get poorer exponentially. But those that own assets can hedge against inflation and ride the wave. And it's such an important economic dynamic that people just don't understand.
We've been brainwashed to think that 2% inflation is actually good for society, when all it is debasing everything you've ever earned in life by 2% year on year. And it's the number they try and target, and the ECB and the Fed, talk about 2% is our target, and they try and make it like it's a positive thing. But ultimately, I didn't agree to have everything I've earned debased by 2% a year. And I don't think everyone, if they fully understood what inflation was, it's a hidden tax, which means they haven't got to get the voters to come into
It's
parliament.
a gross tax as well. Gross tax.
Yeah, it's a gross tax. It's on top of all the tax. Yeah, it's huge. It's the biggest
massive tax.
And if they said to Parliament and government, it's one of the best jobs in the world is to spend other people's money and have no repercussions. That is what government is, and it gives them the freedom to do what they want. So already, Labour. I mean, we're not politicians and stuff, and I try and avoid all this stuff. But Labour have already come out saying we're going to have to borrow money just to make better investments. Well, that is, to me, honestly, that is. Printer says, bruh, I'm going to print a load more money. And the only mirror that we've ever had since Bitcoin come around, the only mirror to these decisions they make is the Bitcoin price. Now, I don't give a shit if Bitcoin goes up or down 50% or up 50%, because one Bitcoin in my world is always going to be one Bitcoin. That Bitcoin, which is a programmable money, which is a rules-based system. So it's the same value. It's liquid. So it's not like a property that's illiquid, where you can't sell a house today or tomorrow. Because if house prices are always moving up and down, we know they drop 10%. We know they go up 4%. They go down 5%, up 10%, based on the decisions government make. But the Bitcoin network is a liquid system. If I decide to sell some Bitcoin today, right now, I'm selling it for a price that's agreed around the world at the same time. So that's why you can transfer local. And I don't think the dollar's going away anytime soon. I think the dollar's here for the next 20 years, potentially. And I just think that we've got another chart in a minute to show you how much the dollar's debased over the last 100 years and where it's going to continue to go over the next 100 years. I don't know if you want to flick to that slide, mate.
We'll go through the next ones just to prelude this. We're going to go through now a load of different charts, statistics, and analogies to help explain some of these topics. So if you are listening to this and you have the option to put on the video, I would suggest putting on the video, because it would just help for the understanding of these different components. So go for it, Stu.
And this is we're doing this because ultimately we got into property. Most people who watch this are into property, and understanding the alpha property, which is this alien type of network, is so important to learn about now. Because if you're into property, you sort of understand that you're trying to hedge against inflation and it's a cash flowing asset. Bitcoin isn't cash flowing, but it doesn't have to be, because it goes up so fast, because not only have you got the reflection or the mirror on inflation that's going up with the debasement of currency, you've also got the network effect, which is where it happens asymmetric. So it's going up faster than the value because it's got so many more uses than just the mirror of the corrupt governments that will debase the currency. So this just shows you visually what the dollar has done. So I think back in 1978 or 1971, I think it was, the cost of a $1 silver coin was a dollar. Now in today's money, it's about $38 for the same dollar coin. So that shows you just how much the dollar, the paper dollar, has gone down over time. And we all know that things go up in time, like assets. But equally, the current, if I put £1,000 in the bank today and left it, like, so my kids, right? So we get, me and the wife, I mean, she's at a point where she understands it. First they're skeptics, then they sort of understand a little bit about it, and she knows it's a deep passion of mine now. But we've got cash. Emily just had her birthday, so we've got a few hundred quid in cash. She wants to put it in the bank and leave it there until they're 18. That to me is the worst thing we could ever do with money, because not only is it going to debase what is £100 going to be worth when she's 21, it's going to be worth about a tenner in terms of buying power. So that £100, she'll probably go out and buy a coffee with it. Why would you want to keep anything in cash? And that's why I've got very limited cash, and everything I reinvest back into assets to try and build for the future. And this just shows you just how much the dollar was worth. So going back to whatever 1919 or 1920, £25 worth of buying power today was the cost of $1 back then. And over time, you can just see it's getting worse and worse. And this was this little slide here is just before the COVID pandemic, which is where they printed more money than they've ever printed ever in human history. The debt's at like 37 trillion and it's going up like a rocket ship, which is another slide. This is showing you how much that buying power is depleting over time. If you use your local currency, whether it's dollars, it doesn't matter, euros, they all do the same, because the way they keep it all looking normal is they all debase their own currencies at the same time or similar times. So yeah, let's move on to the next slide then, mate.
It is slightly interesting though, just to look at this slide. You can see that as the US obviously really took dollar hegemony and really took the grapple or the reins on technology, which has become the biggest sector, the determining sector within all global sectors. Think of all the big companies in America, from Microsoft, Facebook, Google, etc., Intel. It's interesting how as the US took that global lead, they've also stabilized the decline of the purchasing power, and they have the ability as dollar hegemony to export their inflation. So they can, if you actually, this actually is a bit of an illusion looking at this purchasing power of the dollar, because if you actually looked at this in tandem with the purchasing power of other countries and other sovereign nations' fiat currencies tethered to the dollar, and how the dollar has abused its power with the dollar hegemony to export its inflation and effectively bankrupt loads of these smaller countries, it's essentially modern slavery. There is no difference to going to take Africans onto a ship and make them work for free, because they are doing the exact same thing through this mechanism, but they're just exporting it through a modern fiscal system that's hard for people to understand. It's subtle, but they're essentially indebting and enslaving these developing nations in a much bigger way than they ever did in slavery. This
But
is
it's
like
global.
such
It's
a
every human suffers
global
from this.
slavery. Yeah, it's
Every
insane.
human suffers from this, and we've all accepted it, and we all think that this is okay to do. But it's absolute insanity. And until Bitcoin, there was no way out of it. I remember watching a video in 2009, understanding about fractional reserve banking, and I remember feeling physically ill, and I physically went, there was just no point going to work, because everything's stacked on a promise on top of debt. There's two amazing videos that I've been sent recently, and one is in understanding the banks and how banks have been set up. I mean, we can talk for hours on this, but to keep it to point, just to understand some fundamentals about the Bitcoin network, really. The bank, you put £10 in the bank, and the bank go, well, we need to look after this, so we're going to charge you a fee, but we'll pay you interest, which is generally the same price. They've got your money, which is now a debt. They will lend that out 9 times to other people. So they can lend out £9 of your £10, keep a pound, which is the fractional reserve option, lend out the £9 to the to someone who wants to borrow money to buy more consumable goods. That company then put the £9 back in the bank, and they can lend £8 of the £9 out, and that goes on. But the £10 you put in was already fractionally reserved, and now you've got countries that owe each other more debt than they owe each other. So the whole thing is stacked on absolute shit. So this chart is actually getting worse, and it's getting faster and faster and faster.
Yeah.
So looking backwards gives you a much better idea of what's going to happen moving forwards. And then I remember watching in 2017 about Bitcoin, 2016, 2017, and I remember watching the last spike of the last cycle. The reason they print money in 4-year cycles is generally, it was set up in 2008 when the big reset happened, when they printed the first 800 billion. And then what happened is that 800 billion had to be repaid. And they were doing between 3 and 5 year deals with other people who, again, were in debt at the time. But so the cycle of money, Bitcoin runs in a cycle because there's a halving that was set up, manufactured to half the amount of Bitcoin rewards that would go out. There's only going to be 21 million Bitcoin. There's like 1.6% left to mine. This is going to roll out over the next till 2020, 2140. So it's like 120 years to go. Every 4 years or every 210,000 blocks that are created, takes about 10 minutes per block, but that changes slightly based on the amount of blocks and the speed of the strength of the network. But ultimately, Bitcoin is its own time, so it doesn't run in calendar months. Bitcoin has every 10 minutes roughly a new block is created, and I was explaining once, it's like playing a game of Monopoly and having a notepad next to you. And you roll the dice, you roll a 6, you buy this property, you go to jail, you pay fees. Every 10 minutes, the bell rings, and you write down every move that happens. And then that bit of paper gets locked in time. You turn the page over and you write the next block. And that's basically what the blockchain's doing. But the blockchain bits are so small. I think it's only like 4 megabytes per block. That the chain will go on infinitely, because the amount of power that we've got, you can go back at any point in time since the first block that was ever written in blockchain, and you can go 1,000 years, 2,000, 5,000 years out and see every single 10-minute transaction that's ever happened on that blockchain. And this, because it's so small, it's kept on almost every node or every node around the world. And because it's so small, eventually a node will be on everyone's iPhone, it'll be on everyone's eyepiece, it'll be everywhere. It's like a virus. It can never be manipulated or changed unless you own more than 51% of the network. And I want to show another slide to say how that will never, it can't happen. It's physically impossible now.
And just to touch on that point as well, with the time aspect, and Jack Marler does a really good talk on this, and Michael Saylor does a good talk on this, how Bitcoin is a direct way for a monetary protocol like Bitcoin to connect with the physical universe with energy and time, and through that it can dictate its own rules. And one of those is the 4-year halving cycle. And it's inevitable that Bitcoin takes over the global reserve currency. It will. There's no stopping it. When a technology is this superior, it will eventually win, the same way the internet, electricity, AI, the same way those things will win. When it does, it'll be quite interesting to see how the financial system's behaviors change. And they will, I'm sure, look at the 4-year cycles as like a financial calendar, where as it halves in those 4 years, there will be a significant decrease in the the distribution of new Bitcoin mined. And once we're that tethered onto that network, which I think is inevitable, it will be quite interesting to see how financial behaviors change leading up to the halving, post halving. Do you know what I mean? I do think there's
I think the ETF, which is an exchange traded fund, which basically means it's 1 for 1. So if you put $1 into a fund, they have to buy $1 worth of Bitcoin and so on. And there's I don't know, 11 of them now, but BlackRock is the biggest one there. I think now that was the start of the 10-year gold mine or the gold rush, because you've got between now and 2034, which is where this is going to dominate, which 99% of all Bitcoin ever mined will be mined. So you've got countries now that you've got this FOMO where you can have countries, companies, individuals wanting to get a piece of what's left. The price is only going to go one way, but after that 10-year period, I think the whole thing will tether out, because at the moment it's growing it was growing at 65% year on year. It's now averaging about 45% year on year. And my guess is over the next 10 years, it's going to probably go to around sort of 20-25% year on year, because governments are still going to keep printing because they have to. And it takes one government to print to buy Bitcoin, and the whole thing's over. It's called the game theory, because as soon as they start printing their own fiat promise or their own money that they're going to create, they're going to debase their people. And that's why I feel so strongly about trying to tell as many people, especially in the UK where it's not talked about. They've put blocks on every road possible. We will get left behind if people don't understand and adopt this technology. That is inevitable. Yeah. And the more people, and you don't have to buy a full Bitcoin. Bitcoin's at $63,000, 45 grand. You can buy a pound's worth or £10 worth, and you've got the same voting rights, the same network value as someone who owns the whole of Manhattan, or someone who's in Kenya who's working on in a field somewhere. That people can exchange at the same value. And I just don't think don't stay on zero. Understand, go and download Swissborg is the one I use, because Swissborg's, it's an EU regulated exchange. I've met the owners. I met them about 4 years ago. I was invited to Paris for a lovely meal. Lovely people, love what they do in their community. But ultimately, they're an exchange. You can buy and sell. You can put on pounds, and you can buy Bitcoin with it, and you can hold it on there or transfer it somewhere else. Or you've got Coinbase, which a lot of people use, but the fees to transfer your fiat currency into Bitcoin is more higher. But go and download one of those, get yourself ID checked. It's all above board, and buy yourself £100 worth of Bitcoin, and just understand how easy it is. Now, transferring it from one software or from an exchange to over a cold wallet, storage wallet, or a hot wallet, or to move it around is quite a scary thing to do at the start, because you might be moving 500 quid and you're moving it across a network you don't understand. But it's no different than tapping your card and it going off to somewhere, off the Swift, off to one bank, from Barclays to Lloyd's, to go into someone's bank account. There is no difference, apart from there's not all these fee takers along the way. You're just transferring it from one long address, which is your wallet address, into another. And the only thing to keep it secure is 12 to 24 seed phrases, which when you have your own wallet, they will give you those, which takes it as a random set of frequent numbers that will come. You'll see it once. You need to write it down, and then it will disappear, and it's not stored on the internet. The cold wallet now is you're the only one with those letters. So you're just holding information. If you imagine going back to the war and having the Jews leave Germany, and they had to leave everything they ever owned behind, apart from a few hundred quid or the shoes on their feet. And if they could have had this type of technology back in those days, I mean, you've got people in Russia and Ukraine and all this stuff that's happening. If people could leave their country with everything they own in their head,
all the economic power,
everything changes. All the power of the governments that puppeteer us, like, oh, we're going to change this fucking on a reform, change this. All that power goes away. And then taxes is another big thing. Oh, yeah, but the government are going to ban it. But they can't ban it. It's already too big. And if they try and legalize it, it becomes more powerful. So now you've got countries backtracking, like China, saying, actually, no, we're quite pro Bitcoin. You've got Russia, who are now saying, oh, no, we're happy for you to mine. It's not illegal. Start storing it. UK are talking nothing about it. Rishi Sunak was apparently quite Bitcoin pro, but he didn't do anything for the Bitcoin community. And now we've got Labour. So we're fucked. We're going to lose 4 years. He's not going to touch it because it's people who have, got necessary money, but it's a savings technology.
It's good for the lowest in society. Yeah. And
it's
this
best
is
for the lowest of society. Because it gives you the same buying power as the elites,
as the rich people.
The rich people. So buy as much as you can, as quick as you can. And this graphic here just shows you just what Bitcoin back in 2016, it was different. That was where there was FUD. Are the government going to try and ban it? In 2016, 17, they probably could have. They could have made it illegal or made it where you have to pay capital appreciation on unrealized profits, which would have made it it wouldn't have grown. Basically, they missed the chance. Which is great, and then the UK in the last month have now said that Bitcoin is under the same laws as personal property, which is again a great move forward. But I just fear that the UK government are not going to push this forward quick enough, and we are going to be left behind. At the moment, we're a few thousand Bitcoin away from being under Bhutan, and who knows who else is buying? No one knows how much Russia own. No one knows how much China own. No one knows all these countries. You've got sovereign wealth funds that are buying, but everyone's buying. And now the ETFs have allowed companies and pension funds to buy it. You just got to look at BlackRock. There's another slide which we'll come on to show you how much Bitcoin's being bought per week versus how much is actually being created by the Bitcoin network. And it's huge. It's like 10x every week. So the only way the price will go, it's a basic 101 supply and demand issue. There's not enough Bitcoin to go around. Now, forget the fact it's digital. Forget the fact it's digital. It's the most amazing to transfer value from this part of the world over to Darlow, to Ryan in 3 or 4 seconds using the Lightweight network. Jack Maller's done another video when he actually spoke to the IMF. He's 28 years old. His dad's been in the Chicago CME, which is a different exchange in America. So he's grown up from like 15 when Bitcoin was created. All of his dad and his dad's buddies were always talking about Bitcoin and this thing's going to change the world. So he's been in it from the start. He set up the Strike network, which allows businesses to now buy Bitcoin and transfer it around the world. And he done a presentation to the IMF, which was over COVID in 2022. And the slide started with Strike disrupting the money system, ? And he started and he was just like, look, you've changed the slide here. I haven't changed it, so I'm going to change it back. I take off the question mark because it is changed. It's now way past your old Swift systems and all your 1970s technology. And he took Strike off and put Bitcoin and went, I'm just using the Bitcoin network. And he explains it from how the money system has gone. Well worth watching it. And then he talks about this Dorito thing where, all this stuff's in the way, all these fee takers versus the Bitcoin network. And it ends the video on his network. He's in Chicago. He sends over using Twitter value, about $10 worth, over to El Salvador. The guy in El Salvador is in Starbucks. He flicks it, sees the money, and then he sends his money straight to Starbucks and buys his coffee with it. This all happens in less than a minute. And he's like, that is how you move micropayments across the world through different currencies. You try and do that on the bloody Western Union network, it'll take 3
It's
days,
impossible.
and
You
you've
get
lost 30 quid of a
blocked at your
£10
bank,
transaction.
fraud claims, all the bollocks, all the custodians in between. It's just
It's that powerful.
it's a liberation, isn't it? It's just like a freedom to move my economic power as I see fit. And it's such a revolution to how the world works. And I think this graph here is a really good explanation for anyone who doesn't quite understand the severity of the impact that this will have. Because Stuart spoke about before, he's living in a Bitcoin denominated world. So am I. And me and my brother are big proponents of this as well and trying to utilize it in the business. And this is the perfect explanation that you look at house prices denominated in dollars from 2016 to 2020 to 2024, the different halving cycles. You've got 2016, it's worth £288,000, your average home, $1,000, your average home. 2020, it's worth $328,000. And then 2024, $434,000. That is the average home price in 4-year intervals. If you then correlate that with Bitcoin, and Bitcoin in the same period, and granted, there are caveats. It was a new network and there is exponential growth at the start, but there is no reason this won't just continue with the adoption curve we're seeing. So back in 2016, to buy a $288,000 home with Bitcoin, so pricing things in Bitcoin, not in dollars, not in a fiat system, but thinking in the way me and Stuart are thinking, is pricing your life and commodities and assets in Bitcoin. It would have taken 664 Bitcoin to buy that house in 2016.
Which is
In 20
288,000 divided by 664 is $434 per Bitcoin. So you would have needed
Yeah.
664 Bitcoin to buy that house.
Yeah.
Go on.
Whereas in 2020, it's then for a $328,000 home, you then only needed 45 Bitcoin, which is an order of magnitude difference, literally 10x, like almost thereabouts. 45 Bitcoin. So it did cost you 664 Bitcoin to buy a cheaper house, theoretically speaking, like cheaper house in nominal terms because the dollar amount was lower. And then as the dollar amount's gone up to 328, it's now 45 Bitcoin. And then extrapolate that to 2024, and it's 6.6 Bitcoin that buys you a $434,000 house. So common sense would be in 2028, it's going to cost you 0.6 Bitcoin, because Bitcoin is this scarce asset class repricing the world. It's repricing how things operate only if you're in the Bitcoin network. If you're in the Bitcoin network, you can see and utilize and benefit from this repricing structure that is happening ubiquitously across all asset classes, all commodities, all things. Milk, you could do the same thing with everything. You could
Rent.
it all correlates. Rent, because Bitcoin is a scarce asset class that is only going in one direction, and it's not in terms of fiat currency, it's in terms of its tangible purchasing power and its inherent value compared to world commodities, world asset classes. And it's so important to understand that. And it's an order of magnitude every 4 years. That will slow down as time goes on, but the economy is going to increase as a byproduct of technology and AI and things like that. And in that kind of world, you don't want to be in these volatile asset classes. You want to be in Bitcoin, which is volatile on the upside, as is evidented by this graph here. The fact that it's an order
And
of magnitude every 4 years.
I totally get it, right? It becomes quite a scary thought process. You have to open your mind to what the benefits of Bitcoin are, and then you have to ride through a full 4-year cycle. So I'm in year 3 of my 4-year cycle, and I've gone through it. Basically, it's broken up into 4 quadrants. 2 cycles, or two of the years are recovery phase. The year I got into it, it was falling. But as it was falling, and I watched my 10 grand go to be worth 5 grand to go to worth 4 grand. Dollar cost averaging is where you just keep putting in 3 or 4 grand. And what I've done is I brought my purchase price down as the price went down, and I reaffirmed how much I believe in the Bitcoin network. And it's scary because it's so volatile, but you need the volatility for people to buy in at the right time. And you need to go through, because it feels euphoria when it's going up so much, because they are debasing currencies around the world. Then you've got big organizations, Apple potentially going to come out and go, we just bought £1 trillion worth, $1 trillion worth of Bitcoin. This is going to make the price rocket to 200,000, 300,000, 400,000 pounds this cycle. I'm still not interested in selling it, because I don't, even if it goes from 200,000 back down to 80,000, that's still 20,000 higher than we are today. And I'm not looking to sell it in the next 4 years. I want to keep it for the next 40 years, because I don't see what I would want to bring it out of the Bitcoin network to use it for. And the reason that I got into property altogether was I started to understand the fundamentals, like, right, how do I increase my income streams to allow me to buy more Bitcoin? that was always been my strategy, and property and cash flow and assets allowed me to create an extra few grand a month to put into this network, because I couldn't rely on my own salary. I had to try and work out other ways to because I needed family and
It's
insurances to
trading
pay,
out, isn't it?
mortgage to
It's
pay for.
trading out, and we can explain that mechanism at the end. Let's go through the rest of these graphs, and we'll
Yeah, go
explain
on.
how this relates to property. So next one is simply showing the difference in the custodianship from you could have $100 billion worth of Bitcoin, and it's stored on this cold storage device, as you can see there. Yes, that you'll probably diversify and have a couple of different cold storage devices, but the analogy is the same. You can have your wealth on that tiny little USB drive, and the equivalent in gold. Look at that. Like, to transfer that wealth around the world, the time it takes, the cost of being the custodian, it's such a different way in thinking about wealth and preservation of wealth and the sovereignty of private property. Gold, and there's a lot of gold bugs out there who have been proponents for gold over Bitcoin, and they're all merging, they're all converting. Like, it's just happening unanimously. Like, they're all converting to Bitcoin because they understand this, that the differences, and how Bitcoin is clearly a superior asset class because of this fundamental fact, really, that Bitcoin not only is limited in supply because gold does inflate over time, but also you just need it in a little USB drive or just in
See,
the codes in your head.
people look at that and go, well, I'd much rather all that gold versus this little USB stick. But it's the value of what the USB stick can do. So we've been trained to think that this yellow metal that's got some elements and some fundamental issues that you can make it into jewelry and you can use it for some computer bits, that this gold was the best thing we had until we could move information across the internet that can't be double entered. So, if I take a picture on my phone and send it to Ryan and delete the original photo, now that has moved from one person to another. But if I keep the original photo and send it to 100,000 people, it's got no value at all because the picture can just be duplicated. With Bitcoin, the physical network is a push protocol. So we send the data from one person to another. It can never be duplicated. Bitcoin is 15 years old. There's a million a million Bitcoins sitting in one wallet, which is open like in a transparent box for the world to try and hack for 15 years, when the network was 1,000 times or 2,000 times weaker, back at the start, and it's never been hacked. There's not been one hack on the Bitcoin network ever, which again, if Bitcoin stays decentralized and if no one can take the power of it, which is the 51% rule. If you've got more than 51% of the network, you can effectively manipulate the nodes to fuck around with it. But that can't happen anymore. And to have that Bitcoin cold drive, which is effectively just holding your 12 words off the internet, so no one has it apart from that node. And if that broke, the little ledger, then you've still got the 12 or 24 words as your seed phrase, which you put them in the right order. You take the first 4 letters of each word, that creates your password. So it's the most securest thing. And you can walk through an airport with those 12 or 24 words and be anywhere in the world within 2 hours. How the hell would I move all that gold from one place to another without the security, the costs? I can't shave off a bit of that gold and buy a coffee with it, but I can break down a Bitcoin into 100 million pieces. One Satoshi is 100 millionth of one Bitcoin. So we're talking Bitcoin still because it's still almost feasible to try and get one Bitcoin, but there's only 21 million. There's like 58 millionaires in America or something stupid. There's not enough millionaires. There's not enough Bitcoin for the millionaires there are in the world. So eventually the Satoshi, once Bitcoin is worth $1 million per Bitcoin, each Satoshi be worth $1. And that's really where I think that we'll start pricing everything in Satoshis. That's really the sort of pinnacle point. And we're 0.6 of a million at the moment. So there's loads of upgrowth. There's probably a 10x in the next 10 years to 12 years minimum as a base case.
Minimum, yeah. And then this other one as well. Which one is a Ponzi scheme? Do you want to explain this one, mate?
Yeah, I mean, it's quite clear. The US national debt is like a rocket ship or a firework. They've just printed so much money since COVID to pay for all these free stimulus checks and all this money that was sent out. And are you a business? You want to take £250,000 unsecured? Yeah, here, bang, 3 days, it's in your bank account. All this money was created, but that was a promise to pay back to bonds. So treasury bonds or treasury bills is a promise from the government who they printed so much money. Everything's pegged to the dollar for loads of reasons, mostly to do with the war. In fact, everything to do with the war from last time when they had all control and power. But the treasury bills, they've taken the mick with the amount they've printed against nothing, just a promise, and that promise is getting weaker and weaker. And now you've got governments and countries that are not wanting to buy the treasury bills, but they need to print more of it to pay for the last 4 years cycles worth of debt they created. So this thing is going up faster and harder and harder, and it's almost like, you know, the ride will stop, and when it crashes, a lot's going to crash. I'm not here to scare people, but the more you learn about it, the make your own opinion. Equally, Bitcoin is completely fixed in supply. So what's happening there is that the value, as they print more money, the mirror of Bitcoin is obviously going up in value, but you can't create any more of it. It's physically hard coded. No one can ever create it or change a code because it's on millions of computers around the world that it's built into the Bitcoin network. It can never be changed. I don't know enough about the fundamentals of how the Bitcoin network works, but I don't need to be a total believer in it. And it's backed by energy. You know, you have to have about 2 Earths worth of power to try and slow the network down. Well, that's impossible. There's not enough, because the computers that run the Bitcoin network have been purposely built just to do one job, which is to hash a load of calculations super quick and efficient to be the first computer to solve the next mine, the next block. So these computers, ASICs, I think they're called. I don't know. I'm not a miner, but they basically, a normal computer would never do it. You know, a normal, an Amazon data center would never have the power to compete with the specialist Bitcoin computers that are now being sold and made just to keep this network secure. So it's just like, it's unbreakable, and no one can control it. There's no
it's
board
important.
meeting.
It is important to, like, the only reason I bought into Bitcoin in the way that I did is because I went and learned about the technology. And you only need to go and listen to Jack Dorsey, Jack Mallers, Michael Saylor, and a list of other tech guys who explain the technology, and read Satoshi's white paper. And you see that this technology and what Satoshi, on the back of many other cryptographers, devised the best technology ever invented. It is a seminal piece of computer architecture,
It's a
more
money
important than what
technology.
Turing. Yeah, it is the technology for money. It is the number one thing to solve democratic processes and how we want everyone to have their own sovereignty, their own economic power. A truly diplomatic and free society is built off of this technology. So it's so important to go learn about the tech, learn about how it works. And once you do, you don't need to learn all the, the trivial, like, details of different things and bits and bobs, but just understand how, from the ground up, how principally this technology works. And then you kind of see and go, well, fucking hell, yeah, obviously it's better than any other asset class we've had. So next one as well is the available Bitcoin compared to the available capital. Just a nice little graph there as another sort of demonstration of, how little the network has been utilized from what available resource and capital there is in the world currently.
Well, the capital's infinite, so that triangle can go on forever, and everything has got, and I see everything being priced in Bitcoin eventually, because it's such a scarce commodity. Is that the little bit of the black triangle is what's available left, and the rest of it, you've got people who have bought Bitcoin for pennies that are now selling it for hundreds of thousands. I wish I bought it in 2015, 16, 17 and rode the last wave like everyone else does. But when you look at the price, going, oh, I'm not paying that; it's too expensive. You just got to look forward 4 to 8 year cycles and go, well, this thing's going to be worth like, 1.3, 1.7, $2 million of Bitcoin, and it will go on forever. It'll be worth $1 million, then 10 million,
eventually worth $1 billion a coin.
Well, it goes on forever. So because
it's representative of the economy. So if the economy, which is looking very likely, we go out into the cosmos, into the solar system, we inhabit some other planet, and we create O'Neill colonies, and we expand our economy, but the fixed supply of Bitcoin will stay the same. And I'm certain that economy will be debased on Bitcoin.
And if you look again, we can't read the future, but AI, it's very likely that AI is going to come into all of our lives, into our homes, into our cars. Now, it'll all run on an energy that it can trust and verify. And Bitcoin is the energy that everything will work on. They won't want to work for dollars, because it not even like the computers that are going to run themselves. They're going to need some source of energy to live in harmony with humans. And they're all going to run on Bitcoin. You could put a Bitcoin into a car effectively, and that energy that is creating by running the planet, it's mad how far you have to go in your brain. Ultimately, you put a Bitcoin into a car and you'd run that car forever, because that car would then be, not that it's a yielding product, but at the moment it's not yielding because we're not using Bitcoin to its full potential. Like I said, there's only 21 peanuts. So how I program my Bitcoin to be used however I wish to use it in the future will be down to me as the owner of that Bitcoin. And it can be programmable into infinite things, because it's movable value across the internet. And when you get to that point in your mind, you're like, I need to get more Bitcoin. I need to get 0.1 of a Bitcoin. I need to buy another, try and buy 0.001. Because in 10 years' time, buying 0.1 of a Bitcoin, which will cost you $6,000 today, 4 grand, 4.5 grand UK, sterling pounds, will be almost impossible to get. And the value, if you took all the Bitcoin available, which is obviously 21 million times 100 million, whatever that number is, and you divide that by every human on the planet at the moment, and everyone had equal amount of Bitcoin, that value in physical pounds is about $200 or £160. So that's how undervalued the Bitcoin network is if you buy it in today's value. So it's just, you have to learn about it. I can't. I talk to everyone about it. It does my missus' head in. The family will go, how are you? And I'm like, yeah, oh my God. And I'll talk to them about where I see
You
this
got any
new
Bitcoin yet?
stream of Bitcoin. Yeah, I try. I'm begging family members, all the family WhatsApp chats. I'll see something and just ping it in there because I'm hoping that I'm orange peeling one or two of them because it's not. There is no marketing team. There's nothing in Bitcoin. There's no company. There's nothing. It's all to do with the people and the believers. And when you see the power of what this thing is going
It's a
to ultimately
movement.
do
It's
to
a
humanity,
social movement.
it's a huge movement.
Social movement, yeah. And next
It's
slide as
unbelievable.
well.
Go on, mate.
This is US exchange traded funds. So the fastest ETF to $20 billion in assets in 1,000 days or less. So you could just see there the adoption of Bitcoin breaking records and how many billions went into the ETFs as they became compliant in the US in 137 days compared to 985 days. Is nuts.
The fastest ETF in human history, because it gave the gateways, the floodgates opened in March of this year when Bitcoin tripled in value, literally overnight, was because companies, institutions, pension funds,
it's
could all buy into
institutional
Bitcoin.
appetite. Yeah, it's a good. This is proof of institutional appetite for Bitcoin. That is what this shows. Just clear as day. And then you got the Bitcoin supply and demand in the last week. Do you want to explain this one, mate?
Yeah, so Bitcoin creates, I think it's 900 Bitcoin or 450 Bitcoin per day. I can't remember the number because it halved in April. But ultimately, it's creating 2,250 Bitcoin. The network, the protocol of new Bitcoins being mined across the world, whether it's Bhutan or US, China. These are the amount of Bitcoin available on the network that are clean, brand new Bitcoin that's being created. At the moment, it's about 1.8%. Inflate until we get to zero, which will then be everything will be mined. There is this much that's being released, and in 4 years' time, that will half again. But the amount of ETFs that are purchasing Bitcoin is 25,000 a week. So that is the difference in supply and demand, which means to me the price can only go one way because the demand is so high and the amount of Bitcoin. And if you look at actual holders that have been holding for the last 10 years, like 76% of the Bitcoin network hasn't moved because no one is selling it. Once you understand what Bitcoin is, what do you sell it into? You don't swap your Bitcoin back into pounds or into dollars because you take the hardest asset known to man and you hold it and you use it to create either a yield or to be able to lend it to other companies. There's loads of stuff about because it's not a yielding asset. You don't want it to
Or
be a
you might
dead
sell a
asset.
bit. You might sell a bit here or there and buy a
Lifestyle
house,
chips.
a new house.
Yeah,
Yeah,
lifestyle
lifestyle
chips.
chips. Yeah,
And
that'll be a
then
lot of the
you learn the
trading.
cycle. But ultimately,
Yeah.
I think that you hold it and you will use it for the Bitcoin infrastructure, which once people lose the faith in the fiat world, which it will happen as this rocket goes up and up and up and up and up, it will come crashing down quite violently. It normally ends in the fourth turning, which is 20-year stages of life. And we go through these 4 stages and we're in that fourth turning, which is the most disruptive part. Hopefully it doesn't end in war and all the rest of it, but we'll see. There's war happening all around the world at the moment, which is a big part of the money system, in my opinion. It's what it's all pegged to. But ultimately, this disruptive point is where we have a massive mind shift and a massive movement change. And I think that is Bitcoin is so glaringly obvious to me.
Just to touch on that as well, like everything bad in the world can be stripped back to the fiat system. The whole reason that a country like the US or like the UK or like Germany can go to war is because they either run a surplus, so they have profit. The really simple way of thinking about it, they have profit that they can then spend to go to war for some other arbitrary gain. And if they don't have profit, which basically all of them don't now because they run a deficit, they have to borrow from the future. So they have to borrow from my kids to fund that war for some arbitrary gain. Unless there is a net benefit to that, they are stacking more debt onto the future to pay back for these wars. If they didn't have that instrument to forward fund those wars from borrowing from tomorrow, then they wouldn't be able to fund the war. And that's where Bitcoin is a whole different world. There won't be war because it's not financially feasible. It's just such a different way of thinking.
Yeah, imagine if Starmer come on the telly tomorrow and went, right, we're going to go to war because we need more oil or whatever we're going to fight for, and we need to put our taxes up 40% to pay for that. Can we have a referendum on that, please? How many
And that's
people
how the
would
world
vote?
worked,
You
wasn't it?
go,
That's how it
fuck
worked.
that. And you wouldn't
Yeah.
go to war. But the thing is because they've got the power to create their own money, they can go, we're going to go to war because we need to protect ourselves, put the fear of
And do it
God
through
into us where we
inflation.
all become like, effectively like COVID. It's like, bang, you have to stay at home. Like all this control that they've got over what we need to do. But effectively, we can go to war and we'll just put that bill, which that gives them the spending power, the money, the borrowing of the money or the creating of the money, which is then debt, which is owed by the government, goes into your defense companies and goes back into the machine of liquidity or into the economy. But that debt that's been created is now got to be paid off in 4, 8, 12 years' time, which means
Yeah.
that the people of the next generation feel it the most because not only have they got to deal with the current problems of, the NHS and rental reform and all the rest of it, they've also got to pay off the debts of the 90s and the 2000s. They're all stacking on top of each other. It's just madness. And
Greed.
Bitcoin is the way out.
Yeah.
That's why the average person that's buying Bitcoin is between 24 and 44. So it's the younger generation that see the value in this technology that is going to be
Protecting
the
their
biggest
future.
wealth shift ever.
Yeah.
Yeah, because you've got all the baby boomers that are sitting on a load of old cash and a load of old gold and all these 401ks that are stacked on top of more debt that is going to it's potentially going to come crashing down. So yeah,
Absolutely.
still believe in property, but I also believe that with Bitcoin, property won't be as valuable because there'll be other assets to, you can't lift the property and move it around the world. You can't sell it immediately. Yes, there is the supply and demand problem with the amount of properties that are available, but also I think that the cost of the property will come down in value in Bitcoin terms, which we've just shown it will. And ultimately, they will become more affordable. Building a house should be the marginal cost of the purchase price and the land value and the build cost. I don't think that the reason they're inflated so much is because it's also acting as a
Tethered to the debt system. Yeah.
exactly. It's a way of
So
securing
directly
cash and
tethered.
value of today to
Yeah.
spend it in the future, which that
Yeah.
will disappear. So it become more affordable.
And this here is a
And then
distribution graph it's a pie chart distribution of the 21 million Bitcoin. So this is a good snapshot for anyone who wants to understand who owns Bitcoin, where is Bitcoin currently. 57% of Bitcoin is currently owned by individuals, 3.6% owned by corporations, 3.9% is owned by the Bitcoin ETFs, 2.7% owned by governments, 6.6% is yet to be mined, 5.2% is in the Satoshi wallet, which has never moved from inception. 3.4% is held by miners, and 17.6% is already lost. Because when people die with the keys in their head and they don't pass it on to someone else, then the Bitcoin's lost forever. Like you can never get it back, which is basically in death, people aid in the network strength, which is like such a crazy fact. Like there's no inheritance tax. It doesn't go back to anyone else. It's when you die, you take your economic power with you, and that strengthens the network, which is crazy. And then Bitcoin versus internet adoption, just to give you an idea. Obviously, everyone knows the internet was adopted at an exponential rate, and it's changed the whole fabric of the world around us. And Bitcoin is getting adopted at an even more exponential rate, which is shown in this graph here. So what they've done is kind of crossed over from the 90s to 99, the adoption rate of the internet, and then correlated that with 2014 to 2023, the adoption rate of the Bitcoin network. And you can see we're already quite substantially above where the internet was. I know it only looks small on this graph, but in a absolute terms, it is significantly more than the internet,
and
and
this
it
is
will
actual
exponentially grow.
data. Because the
Yeah,
blockchain
this
is
is live
open
data.
to everyone to understand. This is actual physical data. So it's like the government's running a proper ledger that we could all see. No one can see. They don't even tell us how much gold they got in the Fed. And I learned a lot about American politics because everything is effectively pegged to what the dollar do next. But
Yeah.
everything on the Bitcoin network, the amount of wallets being created, the amount of movements between wallets, that's all visible for the world to see. But the actual owner of the wallet, unless they've announced it, is effectively hidden. So that's the power. But it's just mad how quick it's growing.
It's fucking nuts. And then this one, mate. Do you want to explain this one?
What's this one? Target rate probabilities for 2018. Well, this was just the Fed meeting that was taken last. Yes, the probability of the last Fed meeting was 50 basis points, which we knew. I think I think they're missing one in October. I haven't looked into it yet, but I think November they're oddsing another 50% basis points, which is mad because that takes us
That
to
would be
about
nuts.
1.25%, I reckon, by December if they drop it another
Mm.
25 basis points. So yeah, I'm expecting the UK to drop theirs by another 25 basis points. We're actually holding off for the next 6 months because they've got to drop it down so much faster because they now need to create new debt and they don't want to borrow new debt at a higher inflation rate. So
Interest rate,
yeah, that slide shouldn't probably be in there, but yeah, just keep a close eye on the Fed.
And then we've got growth in productivity and hourly compensation since 1948. So just diagnosing this graph, so it's showing from 1948 to 1972 to 2017 as 3 markers. So the compensation includes wages and benefits for production and non-supervisory workers.
This was at the point of which they took the dollar off the gold standard. So you know, energy and time versus the value you got out of that time was very much correlated when it was pegged to something. And when they unpegged the dollar from gold and made it a promise, productivity had to go up, and the amount of value you've got has come down. I think that was what that graph was about. It was a few months
It'd be
ago.
interesting to see the wealth gap disparity as well in line with this. It will correlate almost in the same way because of the ability to utilize debt instruments to leverage asset classes which are a scarce asset compared to those who only earn a wage, who are then vulnerable to inflationary effects of depreciating currencies. And these two things are correlated.
And it's also correlated to health, well-being, divorce rates. You know, everyone is working harder, which means that, you know, we only value the world on a GDP perspective, but that means everyone's working harder for the money. And if you're not having any other quality of life because you're working 2 jobs now and you're working late in the day, everything is getting worse and worse. And that's where, and then people aren't having kids because they can't afford kids, which is then having a huge knock-on effect to the future. So yeah, there's 2 people really just to end this, because I know we've banged on for a while now. People are probably going, "Oh my god, I've had enough," and they switched off, or they're thinking, at least look into some of this because these guys are either mad or they're onto something. There's 2 people. This is the market cycle. It's a circular chart done by Rational Root. He completely hides his identity because he's been in it since the start. He's probably worth billions, to be honest, but he doesn't want the world to know who he is. Totally understand it. But he's sort of tracked with using real data the different cycles of what happens in the monetary system, which is pegged to Bitcoin. So these are the certain areas, and at the moment we're just coming up to the end of that second quadrant before the bull market starts, which is a year, which is all of 2025. Effectively, we've got Q4 of this year, which is where it will trigger some more people talking about it, and then next year will be a bull run, and then it will spend the year coming back down, probably up to 70%. Why it recalibrates, because everyone gets so excited, it pumps and then it will drop back down. And then you've got 2 years of understanding and learning about it, which is what I feel I've done quite a lot of. And then, you know, going into 2028 is when the next cycle will start, 2029 up to 2030, which would effectively at 10x's every sort of year, every 4-year cycle. That's generally what's happened. But this is something to work and watch. Just watch the Rational Route. And then the next slide is a guy called Plan B. I think it was in that order. Yeah, and Plan B was the original creator of the stock to flow model. And he's taken, again, real life data of what's happened at the start. Obviously, it's very volatile. Everyone's trying to understand what's going on. It's the x-axis up the side is done in multiples of 10, just so it's a logarithmic chart. So it actually makes a bit more sense. And it's not halfway through 10 to 100,000 is 50. There's lines on other charts which go from half is like 11,000, and then the next one up is 12. It goes up. It's more compressed towards the top, so it's not designed to be equally distributed. It gets a lot tighter towards the top, but ultimately every cycle is where the price gets very excited in the bull run. It then drops, calms down, and then finds this medium line through the middle, which is effectively showing every time the halving happens that the line goes up by 10. And then it's 4 years that plays out before the next one. So it's sort of giving you an idea. And there's one more guy who does the power law, which is another one. I can't remember his name to date, but these 2, go to put the name into YouTube, Rational Route and Plan B. I think Plan B's Twitter or X is $100 trillion, I think is his handle. But just find them, watch a few of their videos, and just, you owe it to yourself to learn, watch an hour or 2. And then you got the main guys, Jeff Booth, unbelievable guy, Michael Saylor, Robert Breedlove. 3 guys I'd totally recommend listening to their first principles. Jack Marler, oh yeah, Jack Marler. He's definitely one of my favourites at the moment. He's 30 years old, man, and he's just on it.
Yeah, he's an absolute beast. So just to caveat then, why this is so related to property, and here's a way to think about it, and Stu, pass a comment on this after as well. Me and Stu spoke about this. We both think in the same sort of way. and anyone in Bitcoin should really thinks in this way. But we know property, and that gives us a big advantage to other people in other sectors, because the great thing about property is you can utilize this debt system created by the fiat system, where you can borrow money and almost be guaranteed that money will be cheaper in the future, because the government themselves that issue the money cannot afford their own debt repayments. So they have to print more. Because they have to print more, in real terms, money is going down and down and down the shitter, which means it's getting cheaper and cheaper. So the way to think about it is you want to ideally invest into high yielding asset classes, HMOs, apartment blocks, retain the assets or sell them. You can kind of think of your own way, but I think retaining them is better. Utilize that debt, that instrument that the government has created and the banks of the world have created, and you know they're going to depreciate the purchasing power. So you utilize that to grow and amass a portfolio in a scarce asset class outside of the Bitcoin network to then generate income that you can then transition and trade out into Bitcoin. That's the way to think about it, because you can't do it in Bitcoin yet. The instruments aren't there, that you can't get a mortgage or short-term debt in Bitcoin. You will in the future, and then that's a different conversation. But for now, you want to utilize this debt system where you could borrow money that you know is going to depreciate, as long as you're careful with your borrowing limits and stress tests and things like that. But you can utilize the same thing the government utilizes and the richest people in the world utilize to kill off your debt, utilizing inflation, and use that income, that surplus cash from the rent rolls, to buy Bitcoin. And every now and then you could, a couple capital chunks you could take out here and there and buy Bitcoin. But make sure you're using it as a vehicle to hedge out of the fiat system and into the Bitcoin system at an exponential rate, because you can keep borrowing and use tax efficient systems to be able to get your money to go further in the fiat system. But as long as you're trading it into the Bitcoin system, and that then gives you that long-term sovereignty and that long-term security of an asset class off of the network, away from the corrupted system that you've kind of used and abused in a way. Yeah. I don't know what you think
Increase your
about that,
debt
Stu.
position. Yeah, well said, mate. I mean, I would increase your debt position in fiat, buy assets with it, because assets is the only thing that they already want to lend you against, unless it's working capital for a business. Michael Saylor's done the most amazing job on that in 2020. He was highly speculative of Bitcoin in 2013, 2014, put an infamous tweet out there to say, this thing's going to the pan. It's another gambling hack. Governments will shut it down. And then in 2020, he goes on and buys like 270 million of it. He's then borrowed money against his working business to buy more Bitcoin. So he's using debt at 0% interest for 7 years and using all that money to buy. That's why his stock's the best performing stock in the whole of the S&P 500. So you've got Nvidia. Yeah, it's like 900% over since 2020. He's like 1,050%. He's outperformed every S&P company on a colossal scale because he's taken the Bitcoin strategy, and he's done loads of YouTube videos about this, and I've adopted it and gone, right, how do I increase my Bitcoin position? By increasing my debt in fiat that I know is certain to go down in value. As in, if you've got cash in the bank, it's depreciating in value. If I take debt, my debt is becoming weaker, so it's becoming less over time. So that, because the buying power increases, the debt position shrinks. So get as much debt as you can. Increase your debt position in fiat, and then use any surplus cash, buy a cash flow and produce an asset, whether it's a buy to let, HMO, flat conversion, whatever you're into, and then use any positive cash you've got to buy into the fiat. And it works really well alongside a trading business where you can pay your monthly bills, and always have a month to 3 months worth of cash on you to live and enjoy. But if any money you've got that you can save, whether it's a tenner, it's changing your mindset from living in a consumer, I need to consume cash and have credit, to I need to save some money and put it into something that's worth saving in. And that's what Bitcoin is.
Yeah. And every business out there should be adopting this. And me and my brother, Robbie, runs the account side of our business. We are trying to think of all these different lateral ways that we can incorporate Bitcoin as a treasury asset amongst our group of businesses, and try and dollar cost average each month, buy, accumulate more Bitcoin, and ultimately try and get, another 3-4 Bitcoins in a given period. And it's just so worth doing, and it makes you a stronger business. And in a rainy day, in a really bad case scenario, you've got this liquidity which you can go and access, which is why it's different to property. It is a liquid asset class. You can take it out at any given time, but it's stronger than property because it's global, it's sovereign, it's off the network. Go and learn about it. Hopefully this episode has been a good 101 on Bitcoin and how it correlates to property. And please let us know in the comments what you think of it. Do you want to hear more about this? Do you want us to try and get some guest speakers on who are more specialized in the space? And also we can we can recommend a litany of videos and other articles and things you can go and read and listen and learn from. But definitely go and learn about Bitcoin. It is almost self-sabotaging not to. If you're in business, you've got to learn about Bitcoin because it is the future of money. And if you don't know about the future of money, how can you navigate your business in the appropriate way? So definitely go learn about it. Hopefully been a useful one. Thank you for anyone listening. We release these podcasts every Thursday at 5:30 a.m. on Spotify and YouTube. Stu, think it's been a good episode, mate. Don't know about you.
I loved it, but yeah, I'd also if you don't want us to talk about it, I can shut up and just talk about property and business and the rest of it. But it's just so fundamental in the next 10 years of our lives. We have got this gold rush that we need to focus on, and if we can do our bit, and if one or two people go away and learn about this, they'll tell other people about it, and we've done our bit for the Bitcoin community.
And that's the important thing. Yeah, it is about being a part of this modern new community where it's the people first. We, the people, and you saw on that graph, 57% of the Bitcoin network is owned by individuals, not governments, not institutions, and it will always be that way. And we, by talking about it, we are the marketing network effect that can help propagate the network. And that's what's great about it. We don't need anyone else. We just tell each other, and we make the network stronger, and we hold our sovereignty. Fuck the government. I'm joking, but yeah, fuck the government. But anyway, thanks for listening and watching this episode. Big love, and we'll see you in the next one.
Ground up sound